What's up, guys? Pacific Northwest Noob here. This is going to be my first video ever on YouTube. Subject today is I'm going to walk you through how I kind of build, modify, and 3D print something. I have my wife's old ring light that I wanted to mount a GoPro to, and it had an adapter for an iPhone that would not mate up with the GoPro. So I'm going to kind of show you guys how I do that. If you have any comments on how to do it differently, please leave them below. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It would really help me out as I'm trying to get my channel off the ground.
So I'm basically trying to take this old school style mount with a bolt that hooks to that cell phone holder and build an adapter so that it will plug into basically the GoPro mount system. So generally the first thing I do is go to thingiverse.com whenever I'm building something. I do build a lot of stuff from the ground up. However, I find there's a lot of stuff on thingiverse.com that's kind of readily available, and I'm going to show you guys how to kind of easily modify the stuff that's already on there to make it work for what you need. So we're going to go to thingiverse.com. I am just going to go up to the search bar here and type in GoPro and see what pops up. So lots of mount options on here that are already pre-built. However, this flat one is kind of more of what I'm looking for. It looks a lot easier to modify and kind of get to where I'm going. So to download that, I'm going to click Thing Files. I'm going to click Download. That's going to bring up a download folder. Once that starts downloading, it'll download to the downloads folder on your computer. From there, I'm going to use a program called Tinkercad. Now, I actually use two different types of CAD software systems. Tinkercad is generally the one I like to use if there's something that's going to be a very simple modification. Tinkercad is made for like elementary school kids to basically use and build things in computer-aided drafting that just takes basic shapes and cuts holes in and out of them based off of other basic shapes. So right there, I'm actually building a shape that's going to be the size that I'm going to use as the recess for a nut that I'm going to run into this piece of plastic once I get the final thing done. And I'm basically just moving this around, adjusting the size. One important thing to note is to get a good set of calipers if you're going to be doing stuff like this, because I did caliper out how big the nut was so I could see exactly the size hole I needed. Another good note is to always make the hole on a 3D printed part a little bit bigger than the actual object that you're going to put into it. You'll run into a lot where when you 3D print something, the actual finished product, the dimensions are over a little bit, and that's just because of how a 3D printer operates by mashing layers of plastic together. So there I dropped that nut in. That's going to create a hole all the way through. But what I want to do is also build a base, right? Because if that nut was just sitting there in that hole, it's going to be loose, it's going to fall through, the thing's not going to hold on. So I need to build a base underneath that. So that's what I'm doing here. Again, just using simple objects, basically just building up a square. You can see me kind of sizing it a little bit, kind of getting it the perfect dimensions that I want it to make the base for this. I'm just going to center everything up, kind of eyeball it. This program, I use this and I use Fusion 360. Fusion 360 is a much more powerful tool. It took me a lot longer to use. I generally use Fusion 360 when I'm building something from the ground up because you can get very detailed on the dimensions, on the measurements, on the objects you're building. And I will do a video later on where I build something from the ground up on Fusion 360. But for something like this where it's just a simple, quick, and easy part, I'm just going to do a lot of eyeballing as far as the dimensions and what I want it to be. Yeah, and kind of go from there. Very easy tool. This is actually Tinkercad's actually what I used to first kind of get into computer-aided drafting. I took it a little bit in high school, but that was a long time ago, and programs have gotten a lot better since then. So I'm going to take and I'm going to kind of figure out how thick I want that base, right? So it needs to be under that bolt. So I basically ran the base up to the height of the bolt and then figured out how many millimeters I wanted to come down. Now I'm going to go ahead and combine everything and kind of look and see what this finished, or I should say close to finished project is going to look like. I still do need to drop a hole in the middle of that recess that is the size of the bolt that I'm going to run through it. And again, I did caliper that out already. Right here you can see I'm just taking basically a negative square and using it to kind of cut off pieces of this thing that I don't need. One of the really important things about 3D printing is when you're making an object like this, if you can make it as small as possible while still doing what you're intending it to do, it's going to cut down on a lot of wasted filament. It's also going to cut down on a lot of wasted time. So you can see that I actually made an error. I didn't run that up high enough to get that tab, so I'm just going to go back and fix that real quick. Combine everything up. And there I just saved a lot of print time, a lot of work for my printer, and also a lot of filament. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Do it a little bit differently than I did it the first time. I will do a video on how to use Tinkercad and kind of some shortcuts and ways to make things easier for you. But really, if you just get on there and start playing around with it, super easy to learn program. Again, you're just combining positive and negative shapes to build the object. So here I'm going to make that hole that the bolt is going to run through. And I'm going to take it, I'm going to size it up real quick for what I think I need. The nice thing about Tinkercad is it has this built-in feature where if you hold shift, it will actually size something and ratio it. That way you're not getting, you're not shrinking down something from left to right and then making it like total oblong or oval, like this circle, right? If I had just done that left to right, I basically would have got like an oval shape. And I want to keep that as circular as possible. But then when I built that height up, I didn't hold down shift. I just drug the height up, and that actually made it longer without messing with the dimensions of the actual circle itself. So I'm kind of eyeballing that. Again, this is a very eyeball-y kind of program to use. Centering everything up there. And now I'm just going to drop it down, punch it right through the middle, select everything once I think it's where I got it or where I want it, and then hit the combine button, and there we go. That is what is actually going to end up being what the finished product looked like. So from here, kind of going back to that waste and time on the printer, I kind of decided, I believe I had spec'd the original base out to be about 5 millimeters where it comes up to meet that bolt. And then I kind of decided that's really overkill. I don't need that much. So I'm actually going to cut some of that off. And I believe I cut about 2 millimeters off, 3 millimeters off. With the original base being about 6 millimeters thick underneath the bolt. That's super thick. I don't really need that, so I'm just going to cut it off, make it about 2 millimeters thick. This thing is really just holding up a camera, so it doesn't have to be an absolute tank. I can, again, save myself some filament, and I can save myself some print time. And once again, just adjusting that base thickness a little bit. Kind of taking a final look. Really important before you send something to your slicer program, which is what we're going to do next, to just get a quick visual on it and make sure that it is what you need and kind of what you're looking for. I trusted that that clip was actually going to fit a GoPro. Generally, I will kind of look at things and kind of measure them out a little bit. But I figured because it was on Thingiverse, because it was a common thing, I would just go with it. So up there, I clicked export to STL, and what that does is it saves it to the downloads folder in your computer. This program I'm using right here is called Cura. So what Cura is going to do is it's going to take this 3D object and it's going to put it in kind of a format that your printer can actually use. So you're going to see here in a little bit when I play the video that a 3D printer basically builds in layers on top of layers. And what Cura does is it does something called slicing, where it actually builds those layers out and then puts it into a program language that your 3D printer can build those layers from the bottom up. Now I kicked it sideways like that because it's being built in layers and it's going to have to build from the bottom up. If I hadn't done that, those ears where the GoPro mount click into, I would have had to build some kind of support for it. So I'd rather just print them like that. There's also a structural piece there that I like as far as the layers. Now, the cool thing about Cura is you can actually hit preview and you can kind of slide your slider around. You can click play like that, and you can see exactly how this thing is going to do a 3D print. So I'm going to click Save to Removable Drive. It's basically just an SD card that is going to plug into my printer. So once everything on my printer is kind of set up and all the prep work's done, I go ahead and hit print and it starts running. I will go over a video on kind of pre-setup, the actual physical setup of your printer, and what you kind of need to do to ensure print's going to be good. I plugged this video in here. Again, this is like my first time ever recording with a GoPro, ever making a YouTube video, so sorry that that video is very zoomed in and not focused correctly. I did not realize that a GoPro needs about a foot, foot and a half to come into focus. I did want to leave it here though, because you know, Noob's in the title, so I figured I would show off some of my noobery here, but also to kind of illustrate how a 3D printer prints. So you saw at the beginning there was just nothing on that board. What it's basically doing is printing the first super thin layer and then printing another layer on top of it and just repeating that over and over and over again. This print, I can't remember exactly how many layers it had, but it probably had a couple, maybe 100, maybe a couple hundred, and it's building it on the way up. One thing to note about this print is it's not solid all the way through. It actually has something called infill, which is just a solid mesh on the inside that gives it a little bit of structure and then gives it pieces to print off of once it comes to the top layer. I do print solid sometimes, but only if it's a part that really, really has to be a tank. Because going back to you know, the whole time on the printer and wasted filament, solid parts take a lot more time to print, and they also take a ton of filament. So you can see my printer's kind of working pretty hard there. It's coming towards the end. It actually did build its own supports in Cura for the top of that nut hole that you're going to see once I take it off of there and once I start cleaning it up. So I use a magnetic PEI sheet to print off of. It basically can pop off the actual work space on my printer. Very flexible, saves a lot of time and frustration. Very sticky when it's hot, but releases when it's cold. So now we're going to go into kind of the post processing part of the actual physical 3D print. So there you see me ripping off a couple of supports. Those were used so that the top of the bolt hole didn't sag. I like to use as little supports as possible because it is genuinely kind of a pain, especially if you're using some of the more sticky filaments to get them off. And you see me using a couple different tools here to go through and do them. Post-processing is important because if I don't get all of that support off of there, when I try and put that nut through there, it's basically going to jam up that hole and I won't be able to get it through there. Supports, I generally will try and be very delicate with a piece that I print if it's like some kind of art that I don't want to mess up how it looks. But in general, supports, you really just got to get in there, grab them, and start wrenching on them. So I'm basically just trying to clean out that bolt hole the best that I can because when you go into the fitment phase of post-processing to see how everything fits together, any little pieces of plastic like that can make it seem like your print wasn't sized correctly. Even when it was, because it'll jam up that bolt hole. So that was me using a pair of pliers. Now I'm getting in there with a pair of nippers. I generally use a couple of different tools just to really kind of smooth and finish out those pieces. Obviously, you need to be careful with whatever tools you're using. Some people are probably going to balk at this a little bit. I am getting in there with an X-Acto knife. If you're going to use an X-Acto knife to clean up prints, they're very useful. Just please be careful with them. So I'm not putting any pressure towards my fingers there. What I'm actually doing is using that X-Acto knife like a little mini screwdriver to just try and pry up that support. When it 3D prints a support, it makes a layer. It basically skips a layer where the support plugs into the actual piece. So there is kind of a little ledge under there that you can get to and pry it up, and that's generally going to be like the easiest way to get the support out is get something in between that skipped layer and pry with it. Just be very careful if you're using something sharp. So here I'm just trying to hand press in that nut. It doesn't work out so well for me. That hole is very tight. I think I only oversized it about 0.3 of a millimeter. So there's different ways to do it. This particular piece, if you have something that's a bolt or something like that, one of the easiest ways to get a nut into a tight space like that is just feed the bolt through first, hook it up to the nut, and then just pull the nut through. So I'm just going to let you guys kind of watch the rest of this. I really do appreciate everybody that's watched this video. Again, if you have comments on anything to help me out, whether that's different ways to do the 3D printing, different video editing, different camera work, because I am definitely new to video editing, camera work, as you guys can probably tell, please just leave me a comment down in the comments. And again, like and subscribe. I would just really appreciate, especially since this is my first YouTube video. Again, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate your time, and I hope to put out some more videos. If you guys want to see anything different or have any ideas, please let me know. In my description on my page, like I say, I'm into about a million different hobbies, so let me know what you want to see. Thanks.